Nearly 950 families in public rental flats realized their dreams of owning their own HDB home last year. It's a new high since the start of the pandemic.
Well, for more, we speak now to Professor Sing Tien Foo. He's Provost Chair Professor, Department of Real Estate at the NUS Business School. Good evening to you, Professor Sing, and thank you for joining us this evening.
All right. Good evening.
So more than 8,000 families made that leap to home ownership. How significant is that number?
Right. To interpret the number for the last 10 years, maybe you can look at it from two perspectives. At the micro level, we see this number have grown from 500 at the beginning of 2014 to now about 900. So it's almost double the number. But at the broader perspective, the macro perspective, this 8,000 number compared to the people who still on the rental scheme, it's about 8% of that. So there's still a lot more work to be done to help more people to own their house.
All right. Earlier, you mentioned you watched that report that my colleague filed about a lady, Madam Aliyah, delighted over the moon that she finally owned her own house, rightfully so. And she said it was thanks to her CPF savings as well as her grant, which for her was $15,000. How essential is this grant for the? She's of a group, this one group that gets 15,000, and some I also read up to 80,000. How essential are these grants in filling in that final gap for people to own their own houses?
Yeah. I think if we look at the rental housing scheme or public rental housing scheme, actually if applied to family whose income is below 1,500, and most of these family, the reason why are they not buying house? It could be due to financial reason, due to awareness of the policy and so on. I think this 80,000 CPF and housing grant definitely, in a big way, help this family to reduce the financial burden from moving from renting to ownership. I think this 80,000 is definitely a big help for many of these family. Many of them may not be aware of the policy and the grant availability. I think the HDB support team that set up help to these families.
Very quickly, is it difficult to qualify for these grants? Are there difficult conditions attached to them?
Actually, this grant is back to the income. I think for family with 1,500 and below the income, they actually can get up to the maximum 80,000 enhanced housing grant. This certainly help them to reduce their financial burden in owning their house.
Professor Singh, one of the other issues to do with home ownership, of course, is the consideration of the lease and how long it is. So does it matter if the apartment, the flat comes with a 99-year lease or perhaps a shorter one, say 35 years? Yeah, the lease term is correlated with the pricing. I think for HDB flat, most of these flats sold on the 99-year lease. For actually family above 55 years old, we call this senior household, when they're actually downsizing or actually moving from a bigger flat to a smaller flat, they can choose to buy a flat with shorter leases, especially what we call the two-room flexi flat, because for this household, downgrading from bigger flat to smaller flat actually allowed them to unlock or monetize some value. By choosing a shorter term leases allowed them to reduce the pricing upfront.
Earlier you mentioned when Dawn was talking about the 8,000 families, you said that's just 8% of the figure, the total figure we could be looking at. And you said a lot more effort is needed. Now, the HDB has a support team that guides people towards owning their own homes. Why does it matter so much that you want to make that effort to greatly boost that 8% to the ideal 100%?
Okay, if you look at these 8% of the household who are still not owning their house, many of these are low-income households. Many of them actually either they are for various reasons, because whether financial reason, for maybe lack of knowledge about the policy matters, they are not able to transit from the renting to the ownership. I think this support team will be helpful to guide them through the process, because buying HDB flat is a very complex process. Not just financially, there are a lot of these grants availability, what eligibility criteria, and so on. I think for a layperson who are actually not familiar, the policy can be quite daunting kind of experience. Try to go through this process and understand all these different kind of policy available, grant available to support their home ownership scheme. So this support team actually very useful, especially to guide those low-income family who are not really connected with this information and update of the policy. So I think they can actually guide them through from the process. And this can actually reduce some of the difficulty during the process.
Is it always the case, though, that if a person's income, per month, it's not necessarily regular? In the case of gig economy workers, for example, I mean, they may be, doing 1 or 2 or 3 jobs even. Yeah. Maybe they have got a fair amount of income, but it's not the same every month, so it's very hard to plan.
That's right.
Is renting still a better option for them?
Well, I think for this gig worker, even though their income is not stable, I think we look at, depending on the nature of the job, you look at the private hire driver, I think the income can go up to 3,000 or 5,000, even though the income may vary. But one of the constraints for them is they may not have a CPF contribution. That may actually impose some financial constraint. But for most of these gig workers, if their income is 3,000 to 5,000, they actually may not qualify for the public rental housing scheme. If they were to rent the housing, they have to actually look for the open market renting, which is much more expensive. To them, actually owning a HDB flat is still
would be better.
The better options for many of these gig workers.
All right, Professor Sing.
Yes, thanks so much for coming in this evening, Professor Sing Tien Foo from the Department of Real Estate, NUS Business School.
Thank you.